There was a time when Harlequins were held up by senior figures in English rugby as the example of all that is holy, having negotiated most effectively the transition from amateur to professional. 25 years ago, your average Quins fan stood on a grassy knoll at the Stoop in a pair of green wellies with a couple of thousand others. Within 15, Quins were playing to crowds well into five figures in the four stands of an expanding ground all their own. And if the green wellies hadn't quite disappeared, they'd been overwhelmed by a raucous mob who looked and sounded as if they'd always been there. Then Quins became English champions, and we waited for the holy to conquer the world. Their decline since, alas, has been steady according to that crude metric, points accumulation. It had begun well before John Kingston took over, although he never quite convinced as a front man. Now he's gone. Well, he hasn't quite yet. How awkward are these last three matches going to be? No one will know where to look. And the Quins enterprise seems stalled for now. Not that any word as vulgar as enterprise does justice to what has happened according to that more nuanced metric, the way they play on the pitch. There have been times over the last few years when Quins seemed enthralled to some higher calling, adhering to a kind of chivalric code where the style of play is all, and other considerations like the accumulation of points, just a bit ignoble, just a bit, well, vulgar. One game in January 2015 stands out, a European tie at the Stoop against Wasps, but really you could take your pick. Quins donned their shiniest armour and came at Wasps from all angles in a dazzling display of rugby at its most beautiful, at its most princely. And those backstreet gangsters from Wasps ducked and dived, and when Quins weren't even looking, slipped a blade behind the breastplate. That 23-3 home defeat against all logic was in many ways more debilitating, more infuriating than the 35-5 home defeat to London Irish on Saturday that finally cost Kingston his job. On Saturday, they just looked empty of purpose or spirit, whereas against Wasps and so many others back then, they looked magnificent. So magnificent, they couldn't lower themselves to taking easy points. Quins, consciously or not, dedicated themselves to a beautiful game, which, as Arsenal fans will tell you, is a hard policy to make pay consistently. No doubt they expected to win with it, and rarely have there been more popular champions when they did. But after a while it came across as if the aesthetic were more important. Until on Saturday they'd lost sight of even that ideal. The good news is the foundations of their castle remain solid. They just need to convince those holy knights inside that sometimes it's better to hop off the gleaming steed and get dirty with the hoodlums.